organization, which is an umbrella organization for civic and rights groups, says, we are happy that this operation is happening, even though we believe that if it was done earlier, we wouldn't have had one dead person. That's Muzukisi Jam, who's the regional chairperson of that organization. Another community leader says, if the police had acted earlier, we would not be in this situation with bodies piling up. That's Johannes Kwankase, a local community leader. It is disgraceful for a constitutional democracy like ours. Somebody needs to account for what has happened here. The recent rescue operation conducted by the non-profit group Mines Rescue Services began only after the High Court ordered the government to rescue the trapped miners. So the government was not even trying to do this. And this is, for me, quite possibly I won't say the most incredible, because the whole thing has been heartbreaking. But in terms of stories of heroism, here we have one. These two gentlemen, Charles and Mkwai, that's Mzwandile Mkwai and Charles. Let me see if I can find Charles's full name here. But Mzwandile Mkwai and this gentleman known as Charles really came through. And I'm just going to read you. I've clipped some newspaper reports and sort of from 2 or 3, the Wall Street Journal and the BBC and a couple other local publications in South Africa that talk about them. And it reads, 2 volunteer rescuers from the community had gone down in the small cage during the rescue operation to help miners, as authorities refused to allow any official rescue personnel to go into the shaft because it was too dangerous. I don't know if they mean it was dangerous because of the conditions of it, or if they were dangerous because they knew that the miners were now viewing them as adversaries based on how they had treated them. This is where the Wall Street Journal comes in. That's where Charles and Mkwai came in. The mild-mannered childhood friends grew up together in Kuma Township, a few miles from the mine. Mkwai is unemployed, and Charles has worked as a zama, right? Indeed. Charles, who has an 11th grade education, they felt the need to put that in there, said he had last emerged from a stint underground in October himself at a different abandoned gold mine nearby. He had lived in the tunnels below the surface for 3 months while underground commerce was functioning as usual. He regularly purchased food, drinks, and headlamps from vendors who bring their wares into the mines. That's why I managed to go down for the rescue. I was thinking of those guys, said Charles, a father of 4. We didn't care about the danger. We wanted to save those guys. Officials thought it would be prudent to send down 2 locals from the nearby township, as they were more likely to have a rapport with the weak and desperate prospectors than anyone involved in the blockade that had led to the dire circumstances. Mzwandile Mkwai was lowered into the South African mine in a red metal cage attached to a hoist above ground. The first thing that struck him was the smell. Let me tell you something, he told the BBC. The bodies really smelled bad. When he got home later that day, he told his wife he could not eat the meat she had prepared. It's because when I spoke to the miners, they told me some of them had to eat other people inside the mine because there was no way they could find food. And they were also eating cockroaches, he said on a phone call from his house. Allegations that the miners resorted to eating human flesh in order to survive were also made by other miners who were rescued in December in statements submitted to the High Court. I mean, it's almost to be expected. This has happened time and again in situations where people have been stuck, right? You see this with the folks out in was it Chile or Uruguay, the rugby team that crashed out there and survived in the mountains for a long time, and they resorted to such. It's not unheard of. Mkwai, Mzwandile Mkwai, a former convict. Mkwai, a former convict known locally as Shasha, lives in the township of Kuma that was close to the disused mine. The 36-year-old who had served 7 years in prison for robbery volunteered to go down with the rescue effort. I'm being rehabilitated by the correctional services, and I volunteered because people in our community that were seeking help for their children and brothers. The rescue company said they didn't have anyone who wanted to go down. So my friend Mandla and I, Charles, right, that's Charles, and I agreed to volunteer so we could help our brothers to resurface and bring up the dead bodies. But even though you wanted to help, the 25-minute journey down the 1.2-mile deep shaft, or 2 kilometers, filled them with terror. That's such a long... To just be going down 25 kilometers... 25 minutes. Wow, that's from city to city in some places, right? That's about the time it takes to get from Johannesburg to Pretoria if my time doesn't, if you're really cruising. But even if so the crane would occasionally stop and start, leaving him dangling in the darkness. Once he got down in the mine, he was shocked by what he saw. There were lots of bodies, over 70 bodies, and around 200 or so people that were dehydrated. I felt very weak when I saw them. It was a painful thing to see. But Mandla and I decided we needed to be strong and not to show them how we felt so we could motivate them. The miners who had been waiting for help gave them a hero's welcome. They were very, very, very happy, Mkwai says. Mkwai goes on to say, I have to tell you, I'm traumatized. I will never forget the sight of these people for the rest of my life. So he's definitely broken. I took those bodies with my hands and put them in the cage. Our government failed them, says Mkwai. Charles, right, that's been Mkwai. Charles comes in and says it was difficult to assure the anguished man that he and Mkwai would continue to calm down and first them until everybody was brought safely to the surface. It was difficult to decide whom to bring up first, Charles said. Each trip up and down took 45 minutes. They tried to prioritize the weakest, sickest, and deceased for fear their decomposition could worsen. They brought bread, potato chips, and water with them to ease the last agonizing hours underground. Police and rights groups have said that Charles and Mkwai, heroes in their local community where many of the miners lived with their families, will receive access to counseling after their harrowing rescue mission. So these are some other comments. Manas Fourie, who's the CEO of Mine Rescue Services in South Africa, the private company that was contracted to rescue the miners, says, when we got to the level, we could immediately see that there are some people standing. We could not determine the number of people that are standing there, but it was evident that people were standing around and they were in need of help to come up to the surface. It was traumatizing to see these people, Mkwai said. My heart is broken. The ordeal has also made Charles think twice about returning underground to prospect for gold, despite the lack of jobs. He hopes the government will legalize the Zama's work, allowing the prospectors to dig more safely in closed corporate mines. I'm not sure I will go back down, Charles said. Maybe next time it will be me. So if you've been following, you may already have a clue as to why the South African government did not act sooner. South African police spokesperson Atlende Mate said on Wednesday, this is January 18th, I believe, that the deaths recorded were not the police's fault. The kingpins, those that are behind these operations, are the ones that should be held accountable, she said. Officials have also blamed the Stilfontein gold mine, which owns the rights to the mine in Stilfontein, saying it should have secured the mine and ensured it removed trespassers. Remember, they closed down the mine in 2013, so now they are saying that they didn't do a good job of closing it down. In September, at the start of the operation, authorities said they were going to wait until all the miners exited the mine and would then arrest them. Their crackdown was part of the police and military's joint operation called Vala Umgodi, which means close the hole or close the mine in Zulu, which was launched in December 2023, as I mentioned earlier. The operation involves closing off shafts of entrance to mines, cutting off provisions from the outside and forcing miners out the ground. Officials say that more than 1,000 miners had exited mines across multiple cities during the operation, and that explosives, firearms, and more than $2 million in cash had been seized. We are not sending help. This is the quote in November by the minister and the president in Chaveni, which really got the people talking. We are not sending help to We are not sending help to criminals. We are going to smoke them out. They will come out. Criminals are not to be helped. Criminals are to be prosecuted. We didn't send them there. So Chaveni is saying this, right, is vile, as we've already stated. However, you can see that these are not sentiments that only she has. Other people are sharing the same, right? The president, Cyril Ramaphosa, 2 or 3 days after Chaveni's comments, had chimed in and said, the Stilfontein mine is a crime scene where the offense of illegal mining is being committed. It is standard police practice everywhere to secure a crime scene and to block off escape routes that enable criminals to evade arrest. The police will carry out their duties and responsibilities to bring the illegal miners to the surface safely. A group of 14 miners, including a teenager, escaped from an unsealed shaft back in November. The men say they trekked for hours to get there, and one man told Al Jazeera at the time that people he left behind were dying, so this must have been the beginning of what became the 87, and that some are already dead. Another added that a boss in the shaft had tried to prevent them from leaving with a gun. So these are the conversations, right? These are the criminal syndicate people that the government will point to, these bosses who have guns. But again, those are not the only people you're victimizing. Clearly they have guns and so forth. They have a little more leeway within that space. What about these kids, right? However, police officials doubled down on their refusal to launch, at the time, a rescue operation, insisting that their escape proved the miners were not in distress and were able to get out on their own. Activists pointed out that it would take some people days to get to open shafts, and that 2 men were already weak without food or water. After the rescue operation was done, Major General Patrick Asaneng, who was the acting police commissioner of the Northwest Province, said, "There is nothing we would have done differently. The people who must take responsibility for the deaths that have happened here are those who are benefiting from illegal mining," said Minister Gwede Mantashe, right, who's the mines minister. And South African Police Minister Senzo Mchunu says, where these products go, the stuff that's being mined, is a subject of our investigation, adding that illegal mining is robbing South Africa of a lot of money. So that number I stated earlier was $1 billion, but according to the mines minister, Gwede Mantashe, that number is closer to $3 billion. You know, that number, the trade bled the South African economy more than $3 billion last year, according to the mines minister. So this is what's driving the government, and they've been pretty unabashed in saying that this is not our fault, right? And when you consider too that I believe that it might have been Cyril Ramaphosa, the president's minds, a decade or so ago, Maracana, where protesting miners were mowed down and shot in scenes reminiscent of apartheid South Africa, of Sharpeville and the Soweto riots. The powers that be and miners, whether formal or informal, that goes back decades, that conflict. So now we are seeing it manifested this way, and it will be interesting to see where it goes from here. As I'm recording this, it's been a week or so since the rescue operation happened. So there's been some of these comments from the government officials and the police are in the aftermath of that, as are the comments by Charles and Nkwai, right? The two gentlemen who went down and rescued the people. Those were, of course, but now we're going to look at a couple other comments. This one is from one miner who decided to go anonymous, and it says, this is after the fact. I feel like I have some bad luck because I had been only underground for 2 weeks when the operation started. That is when things started going bad. We stopped receiving food and we lost contact with the outside world. That could only mean that the police have arrived and probably arrested or scared off the people lowering the food. So this would be some other people who were not just family, or but some of them were selling their food, including one kid I read who I read was making as much as $400 by sending food down to the mines here, which is probably another maybe not stated reason, but another thing that the authorities might be looking at as well, because that's money that's not being taxed, right? Which again, this is a terrible way of looking at it, but I'm just saying that's how they might be looking at it. The miner said that months that followed were horrendous. By September, things were really bad. People started getting hungry, they started getting sick, some started dying. We started having dead bodies. There is nothing worse than seeing somebody die, and there is nothing you can do about it, he said. The miner, a 40-year-old father of 6 children, exited the mine in December through a separate shaft that had steel stairs. It is extremely difficult to navigate, and he bruised his hands badly on his way out. So he's not one of the people who came out with this group. He came out a bit earlier. The miner said that he was told he could earn about $5,300 for working a few weeks to a month in the country's deepest gold mines, where there are no longer any official operations. It's a huge sum in South Africa, which has deep inequality and one of the highest unemployment rates in the world, as I told you guys earlier. $5,300, this is what the publication says. But I would argue that $5,300, which is not taxed, within the space of a month, is not just a huge sum in South Africa. I would argue that is a huge sum in most places in the world. I live in the US, and I think if you are earning $5,000 a month, your net takeaways are $5,000 a month, you are doing well. You are doing far above average. You're doing very well. Many other miners come looking for work from neighboring countries like Mozambique, Zimbabwe, Lesotho, Malawi, and Congo, and children are sometimes roped in. There were 13 children among those who came out of Stilfontein Mine last year. That's one aftermath thing. Another aftermath thing that's happening here is South Africa now hunting a Kingpin who escaped during that January 16 rescue operation. James Neo Choeli, a Lesotho national known as Tiger, has been accused by other illegal miners of being a ring leader who was allegedly responsible for assaults, tortures, and deaths underground, as well as keeping food from others, the South African Police Service said. Choeli was neither booked into custody nor admitted at any local hospitals for medical care, police describing his escape as an embarrassment. Heads will roll once they find those officials that aided the Kingpin to escape from police custody, they said. Tiger is a fugitive of justice and is considered dangerous. So that's where I will stop today's conversation, right? Very horrifying set of events. The poverty and trials and tribulations that get people into it. Just think about that life. Even in the absence of the cops and this, just being underground for months on end, looking for a come up, is already such a crazy thing. Before we even get to the cops and the eventualities, I'm sure that people are already dying especially if you add the extra ingredient of criminal syndicates and people with guns and so forth, which means chances are sometimes people act out of line and they get shot and their bodies are just in there, right? I can't imagine that the gun wielding gang leaders would want those bullet ridden bodies lifted to I don't know. I'm just theorizing here, but it's already terrible, right? Then you add this very, acrimonious, antipathic, antipathic government and the police, right? That just seem to be making this even worse for the people in there. But you, on the other hand, it's also you wanna legitimize. $3 billion is a lot of money to just be going out there, especially if this involves gang leaders, right? But again, I feel that the lowest layman in this, right? The lowest common denominator in this is who is suffering the most. They're at the whims of the South African economy, which is already terrible for the poor people, right? It's they're victims of the government and police who are saying, you know what, screw them, let's smoke them out, and they are victims of the criminal syndicates who put them to work on these things, right? So they lose, and they lose again, and that's yeah. What can you say about that? I'll be keeping you posted as this story unfolds in the future. If you guys are interested, let me know. But yeah, this has been a breakdown of the Stilfontein crisis and rescue operation born out of the larger picture of Operation Valaumgodi happening in South Africa right now. Thank you so much for taking your time to spend the day, the evening, or whenever you're watching this with me, even if you split this up into several viewings. I'm so glad and honored to have your audience. Thank you so much, and join me next time for another Pan-African conversation.